Trap is a 2024 film by M. Night Shyamalan. I feel like they should have called it Lady Raven. Maybe that's a less thematically on-point title, but it's more memorable and less generic than Trap. I am a therapist and I really want to talk about this film after seeing it yesterday. There's a lot to say on both sides of this. You know, I do have problems with this film. We will most definitely be getting to that. However, there's also a lot to love here. I feel like a lot of people panning this as the worst of Shyamalan are being quite extreme. I'm known for being slightly on the optimistic side, but there's a lot I do want to drill into here, so stick around and see what you think while we break this one down. No spoilers initially, by the way. When we do get to them, I'm going to give you a warning, but for now, let's get going. So before we do get into anything psychological, I'll just say the obvious point first, which is that you get a big tick on this film for its premise. That's why people went to see this in the first place. As stupid as the premise kind of is when you think about it, it's still a really engaging, interesting idea. A dad takes his daughter to a pop concert to then realise the stadium is surrounded by police looking for a serial killer, and the twist is that this dad is the serial killer.
Well, the feds or whatever heard that he's gonna be here today, so they set up a trap for him.
And now he's got to escape without his daughter discovering his secret. Damn right, I have to go see that. It's interesting. It feels like a classic 90s thriller idea, and the trailer is an incredibly succinct, strong argument for this film. Even visually, I think the setup of a concert is really engaging. The film does a good job with that. The concert, the arena all feel massive and packed with people, and it feels like that visceral sensation of being at a concert. There are a lot of plot holes. I think you can tell they came up with the premise for this first and then tried to fit a plot to that idea to somehow make sense of it. Because the explanation for all of this feels A, a little bit weak, and B, like it's wasting a lot of runtime trying to explain it. Personally, I don't much care that the idea is a bit stupid. I think rather than trying very hard to make it seem more realistic, the film should have just leaned into it being a little bit dumb and go, yeah, we don't need to explain this too hard, that's how it is, you've seen the trailer, you know the idea going into this film anyway, so let's just buy into the suspension of disbelief and enjoy this one. Because I do happily suspend my disbelief for how fun of an idea this is. It might just be me, but it feels like film criticism on the internet especially is increasingly obsessed by plot holes and realism as like the main talking point, rather than meaning or character, or just good old-fashioned fun. Not to say plot holes can't be important, because they are, but I feel like they're the bottom layer of film criticism, where often the internet seems to treat it like the big make-or-break point of a movie. So I don't know, my personal problems with this film aren't the plot holes, but there are a lot, so that might bother you. Still, as interesting a premise as it is, a premise is just a premise, and you've got to execute and deliver on that. So in terms of execution, what is it I love about this movie? First off, it's Josh Hartnett. My girlfriend Kirsty was really excited for this movie when she saw he was the main character. She is a massive fan of the film The Faculty. I didn't know who he was, but he was good in Oppenheimer, and he is genuinely brilliant in this. There's so many different things the guy is having to juggle when you stop and think about this character, because on the one, he's got to come across like a good dad. At least good enough that you can buy his daughter liking him and wanting to spend this time with him. But two, he's not actually what you'd call a warm personality. So Josh Hartnett has got to come across like someone who has a concept of what a good dad is and is trying to perform that part for his daughter. So many of the exaggerated excitement mannerisms he pulls off, where on the one hand it does feel exactly like an ordinary dad just desperately trying to connect with his daughter, and how, everything dads say is a bit cheesy and it can make their daughter roll their eyes. That kind of trying too hard because you don't feel quite as close as you did when your child was a bit younger and less independent. He nails that in itself, and the film has a lot of fun with that kind of slightly awkward dad-daughter relationship. He's trying very hard to act all fun where his mind is actually elsewhere, and she, not really buying into this act of fun, just wants her dad to be with her. But then, of course, there is the added dimension that this character, who is named Cooper, by the way, he has no idea how to sincerely and openly connect. All of it feels like a performance, not just of a dad trying too hard, but of an emotionally cold man who has compartmentalised his identity and is trying to follow all the signals from a guidebook he's observed of what a dad should be like. I adore how wonderfully off every single interaction is in this film. Like, it's almost human, but never quite. And you could argue that's because M. Night Shyamalan doesn't know how to write human dialogue, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. It feels like a deliberate artistic choice here. It feels very clear that this is what Josh Hartnett is going for in his performance. He goes all in on that. You feel a slight pause in a lot of his responses, like he's stopping to read the signals and think about how to respond, rather than just being a person. And I especially find the way a lot of the one-to-one conversations are filmed enhance this idea. There's a clip you see in the trailer with this guy Jamie who basically explains the premise to our protagonist Cooper. And in the trailer you've got a load of dramatic music and effects that make it all feel very tense, but in the actual movie this dialogue scene plays out with no sounds beyond just the general murmuring ambience of people in the background. The camera is so intensely still and the focus is so on Jamie, there's like no movement at all, no other sound. It makes it feel a little bit like everyone moving in the background is just on a green screen or something, even though they're not. And I think intense is the word there. The camera and Cooper by extension feel hyper-focused on Jamie's face and his expressions, and that is so fitting for who this character is. The same thing happens elsewhere with the mother of one of his daughter's friends. He gets a one-to-one conversation with her, and this hyper-focused camera where everything else is just a background. It's so effective and so eerie and really sells the inner workings of this man, where talking doesn't feel like connecting so much as scanning and trying to read the signals of other people. And then add on top of that, you got Josh Hartnett having to add the extra layer of this man's internal panic, the sense of, oh no, I am in a trap, I've got to get out. And this one's, I think, really the difficult point, because he has to walk the line between being very internally panicked, but also trying to hide that. A, so that his daughter doesn't think anything is wrong with her dad. B, so he doesn't make himself look suspicious. And most interestingly, C, because this is a man who needs to feel in control. As a matter of identity in psychic survival, Cooper has to feel that this is his playground. He's mapped everything out. There's no surprises to derail him. There's no threat to his feelings of power and control. He wants to feel confident and kind of suave in order to spare himself that panic. And what you get then is actually a very panicked man desperately trying to convince himself he still feels in control, and that's really nuanced the performance. There are moments in this where he does trick people, such as a moment where he walks through a group of policemen without them questioning him or anything, and you see him grin with delight, like it's a real moment of triumph, of yes, I can actually get to feel in control again. And to talk just beyond the performance itself, this is where the film gets really interesting for me. The fact it does not glorify this kind of killer the way most films tend to do, or even society at large. I think most films would make a serial killer like this Cooper, make him a super charismatic, suave kind of guy who never breaks a sweat and feels invincible, and everything he does is kind of presented as so cool and so smart. You know, there is that superhuman, invulnerable sort of glorification that you do get as serial killers. And to an extent, Cooper does display those traits. He certainly does trick a lot of people. And there are moments near the end of this film in particular where he has a slightly annoying magical ability to escape from impossible scenarios. That is where plot holes start to bother me, to be fair, because then it feels more like a gimmick to manufacture tension. But for the most in this film, I think Cooper is presented as someone kind of pathetic, comically so. Because you're following his perspective, you get to see how desperate and kind of stupid a lot of his actions are. There's one scene where this hole in the stadium floor opens up near him and his daughter in the crowd, so that like another performer can walk through the crowd on his way to the stage. And Cooper's seeing this hole and he's thinking, maybe I could escape down there, so he starts trying to like playfully convince his daughter to go down there with him, like it's a bit of fun, like, oh, I wonder what it looks like down there, let's go have a look. And she's just like, are you okay? What the hell is wrong with you? I'm watching a performance here.
Hey, We should climb down and see where it leads. It looks really cool.
What?
His attempt to convince her there is so stupid, and the comedy of it lands so well as a result. There's a lot of moments like that in this film where it's just poking fun at Cooper. Adds to that how he never really feels one step ahead of the police, despite trying to act like he is. There's a moment early on where he pushes a woman down some stairs to try and make a distraction to escape, but then there's still loads more police at the next doors. Of course there is, so it's just pointless and he has to shuffle back again. Like, he thinks he's doing this really creative, clever thing to outsmart them, but it just achieves nothing, you know? Or the more extreme example, later in this film, he causes someone to suffer horrific burns for the sake of a distraction. Like, there's no sadistic enjoyment in it either, there's no gratuitous focus on the victim. It's just as a distraction so he can sneak up to the roof, but again, there are police there and he's forced to just wander back with his tail between his legs. And then as he comes back, you get this long shot of the victim being escorted away in deep burns and pain, and it just feels like it was all for nothing. You've scarred someone for what, Cooper? To realise that, yes, of course there are police positioned on the roof. It's a film of someone trying to desperately convince themselves that they are in control, they are the smartest one here, they are the cat, not the mouse, while at the same time he so clearly isn't that. He is the mouse throughout all of this, so much so the criminal profiler who is running this operation, she never feels like a character that we're close to, that we see frustrated and stressed. She's always at that sort of distance, like she's the powerful, composed one that you can't quite reach. I think most of Cooper's successes in this film come down not to some great deceptive ability, but simply the sheer confidence to give it a try. Or not even confidence, the sheer need to convince himself he's confident. There's nothing especially clever about how he manages to walk through a group of police, it's just ballsy, and that's why it works. Even his conversation with Jamie, you can so clearly see how forced and flawed Cooper's lying is. It's just Jamie happens to be so excited about this serial killer, so personally obsessed with the butcher in a morbid interest kind of way that he can't help babbling on to this man who wants to listen about it. So that is a really fresh, original idea in my mind. Rather than bigging Cooper up like the classic glorified killer, the film creates a lot of surprisingly fun comedy, just poking fun and undermining him in a way that feels more real to me. A lot of killers do possess great intelligence, yes, but the need for control and power and feeling clever, I suppose, also often leaves massive blind spots that can be exploited. I could give some more examples of kind of stupid things Cooper does that the film undermines him about, such as completely miscalculating what his family will do in a specific moment. There's also a slightly odd bit to do with his relationship with his abusive mother and how deeply ingrained that is in his internal world and how much that affects everything. The psychological profiler who is running this operation reminds him of his mother, and that leaves him incredibly unnerved. That is a massive part of why he feels like the mouse despite trying to hide that feeling. But yeah, there's this odd bit where one of the characters starts trying to talk to him the way his mother used to. His character has been captured by him, but if she talks the way his mum would and she's all commanding and talking about punishing him, maybe that will weaken Cooper and give her a chance to escape. It doesn't work because it's so obvious what she's trying to do, and Cooper knows that as well, but it does nonetheless rattle him a lot. It shows how very easy it is to get under Cooper's skin, and I think at its heart that is what I love so much about Trap. You are taking a classic idea of a serial killer, admittedly a little too much the textbook stereotype one for my liking. The relationship to his mother feels a bit typical, and I can't say there's huge depth, but nonetheless, that glorified type of person who seems invulnerable and superhuman, and then showing us just how very easy it is to rattle him. It's so easy. And in a way, this is kind of what I think a lot of people's problems with the film are, because they go in wanting him to be really clever and superhuman, and that will add more tension to the film. And then it's kind of frustrating and underwhelming to see him do stupid things. It doesn't present that classic kind of thriller tension as well that way, but it's exactly what I love about this. But that said, I want to go a step further and talk about the really interesting stuff, which is theme. And this is, I'm afraid, where we do have to creep into spoiler territory. This film has a surprising twist that I think turns a lot of people off based on other reviews I've seen. And I get that, because the twist is kind of this film's structure in itself. You expect this to be set in a concert with the whole film revolving around how Cooper escapes the stadium, but then halfway through the film he does escape, and then everything pivots into something completely different in a way that can just make you go, huh? It wasn't at all what I expected or would have liked if someone explained this to me before I went in, but actually seeing this, I loved the twist, at least to begin with. It's where we need to talk about the character Lady Raven, who is played by M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, who made all of the music for this film. I think the music is fine, I think her acting is also fine. But she starts this film not really as a character. We only see her from a great distance. She's only the pop star that Riley, the daughter, is idolising. We see her at the same distance Cooper and Riley see her, but then his daughter has the chance to get closer, and so we move closer. Riley wins the chance to go on stage with her briefly and then get backstage access. And that's when we get this odd bit of a big gamble moment. Cooper realises he's a bit trapped, and so he has a private conversation with Lady Raven where he confesses he's the killer. He shows her this prisoner on his phone and he says, if you help me and my daughter escape this arena, I won't kill this man. If I get arrested, I'll press a button to release carbon monoxide and he's going to die. That will be on your conscience, Lady Raven. You're going to get us past the police and drive us away in your limousine. It's a surprising gamble I didn't expect, but also one that makes sense with Cooper's increasing desperation to try and feel in charge. The gamble kind of works. She does drive them away in her limousine, but rather than drop them off near their car, Lady Raven instead asks Riley if she can come and visit their house. Like, adds to the fan experience of getting to meet the pop star. She's gonna go back with them to their home. And Cooper can't say no because this is like a daughter's dream, and then you get this absurd, really funny scene of them just sitting in his family home, having tea and talking about the butcher killer. It's a weird inverse where normally it'd be the celebrity wanting to leave, but in this scenario Cooper is trying to get this pop star to go out of his home, whilst Lady Raven is very weirdly trying to stay. The family around are not really knowing what's going on in this tension. I love the comedy of that idea. It's again not what you expect out of this film. I didn't expect so much comedy, but it's great. And it's where you realise this whole film has flipped. Suddenly Cooper isn't the main character. Suddenly he is clearly the antagonist. Lady Raven is suddenly the protagonist, and what we get is a showdown of two different ideologies. What do I mean? Well, Cooper is all about traps. He's all about compartmentalising his life into confined boxes, the way he keeps his victims. He talks in this film about the way he believes no one is actually whole. Everybody is just fractured pieces, for which he, unsurprisingly, cuts people up. But that's what all of his life is, trying to be a fireman at work and also a brutal killer. Never let these distinct compartments spill into each other. I am not a complete, unified person. I am a selection of totally isolated ideas. I even quite like near the end of this film, he talks about this monster he has inside that he needs to release, and does so into these distinct, confined areas, so that it doesn't consume all of him and all of his life. That makes sense to me as a way someone like Cooper might feel about his crimes, or at least convinces himself he feels. He is all about separation and confinement and compartmentalisation in a way that half makes the trap in this film his element. That's his ground, you know? Whereas Lady Raven is all about openness and vulnerability and connection. Breaking down the walls of compartmentalisation. She isn't just some generic pop star, she gets to feel incredibly human. I think the film could do a little bit more to kind of poke fun at Lady Raven and point out some of the hypocrisies and that kind of stuff, but when she is actually a singer and she is being played by the director's daughter, it's unsurprising the film is hesitant to criticise her in any way. There's a moment in this film though where she opens up to her fans on stage and she has them all shine their torches if they feel the same way as her, for which you get a moment of all of this stadium feeling connected as one. Everybody shining the lights, where Cooper is left standing a little taken aback by everyone else. Openness is her power in this film, and it's kind of what allows her to triumph over Cooper. Rather than stay isolated, she will go into their family home, you know? She will connect to these people, and that inevitably takes Cooper way out of his element. His two lives aren't meant to overlap. Suddenly, she's forcing them to overlap, and he can't bear that. It is Lady Raven being able to reach hundreds of thousands of fans in an instant via a live stream on her phone that enables them to come together and save Cooper's victim. It's a little bit clunky and clunky and forced how that happens. Sounds very convoluted when I explain it, but I do still like the idea behind this. This film is a conflict between separation and connection, an idea that does make the father-daughter themes of this film work so well, because then his daughter Riley, who is also a massive fan of Lady Raven, ends up a bridge between these two distinct ideologies. It's nothing super deep, but it's still thematically really interesting and adds that extra layer to what is otherwise just a pretty fun, fresh thriller film. So if all of that is great, what is my problem? As I said, the first half of this film is all about Cooper as the main character trying to escape the arena. Then he does escape, and it's all about Lady Raven trying to A, free Cooper's prisoner, B, catch Cooper, and C, not get herself killed in the process. All of it reaches this very logical conclusion where he tries to drive away with Lady Raven trapped in his car. He says one last crime and then I will end it all. Only the garage door pulls up and his family is standing there stopping him driving out. It makes him freeze. He's forced into a choice between his two worlds. Either drive through his family to escape, or kind of lose. Let the police catch him for the sake of his family. Lady Raven takes this moment to slowly get out of the car. Cooper is too stunned and too frozen to stop her. The police start arriving and he gets out and he calls to his family, making this wonderfully cold last goodbye to his family by telling his daughter she's gonna sort her problems with her friends, reminding his son to finish a school project he's been working on. That's kind of all he has to say, and then he stands behind the garage, letting the door close over him again, and it just feels so much like the fitting conclusion. His compartmentalization fell apart, and so now he falls apart too, either to be arrested by the police surrounding the house or to end everything. The film has made a lot of comments about carbon monoxide, so that's kind of where you think it's going. Thematically, that works as the end here. Only the film then keeps going, and as a result it starts to lose more and more steam and pushes past the natural point of conclusion and then struggles both to find another appropriate ending, as well as any sort of climax to keep the film building towards, because we've already had that. And what we then land on for the ending really is a showdown between Cooper and his wife. But we don't really know his wife. She's barely been a character in this film. She only cropped up right near the end and she hasn't really had any chance to express anything. So it's not much of a showdown between two different sides. If you're gonna have this kind of moment at the end, it absolutely has to be between Cooper and his daughter. She's the one with all of the emotional depth to be mined. She's the one with the relationship we see to Cooper. She held so much of the focus for the first half of this film, and then she kind of disappears towards the end besides one quick hug. I find that decision really baffling. I think the moment with the garage door closing is a perfectly fine, solid end to this movie, and I might have given it an 8. Maybe that's a bit generous, I don't know. But as it is, this scene with his wife, where we've already hit the big thematic climax of this film anyway, it just makes this scene feel like it exists simply to explain the plot hole, explain how the cops knew Cooper would be at this concert. And as I said earlier, I don't think that's needed. I think sometimes it's better to go never mind the explanation than to basically derail the last portion of your movie for the sake of a clunky explanation that still has plot holes. Because it's gone past the point of a natural ending, it really has to manufacture tension in order to keep this film going, which does mean Cooper gains a magical ability to escape situations repeatedly. It happens 3 times at the end, and each time it's less impactful than before. It's frustrating. It is such a whimper of an ending, both thematically and conflict-wise, that it's fair to mark this film down. Personally, I'm still inclined to give it a pretty solid 7. Whatever you might say about M. Night Shyamalan, he certainly brings original ideas. And out of the admittedly few films of his I've seen, this one does feel like the most original in its idea to me. Arguably, it's very frustrating to see a film not quite deliver on such a good original idea, but because it is still so fresh, and because Josh Hartnett is so good and I had a lot of fun, I'm still loving this one. We watched this right after seeing Borderlands in the cinema, and that struck me as a perfectly fine film. Hard to really criticise too much of it specifically, and yet the film itself feels incredibly generic and kind of bland and forgettable. Played it really safe as a film. Much less flawed than Trap, but also much more forgettable. Trap isn't forgettable. But yeah, let me know what you think. It has been a divisive film, so let me know if you disagree with me. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe. Maybe even support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Grace, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Hoare, Michael Gallagher, Chad Bramwell and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.